One wrong word. That was all it took to turn a $4 billion empire into ashes. One misplaced syllable in a language most people would never speak. One mistranslation in a room where power spoke only in precision. And the woman who would save it all was not supposed to speak at all. The Obsidian Club wore its exclusivity like armor. Nestled on the 42nd floor of a Manhattan tower that pierced the December sky, it was the kind of place where senators dined beside oil barons, where billion-dollar handshakes happened over 30-year scotch, where the world's invisible machinery ground forward over white tablecloths and crystal stemware. Charlotte Bennett did not belong here. She knew this the way she knew the weight of her own exhaustion, the way she knew the exact number on the hospital bill that had been growing like cancer for 2 years, the way she knew that her entire life had become a series of small surrenders to necessity. But necessity had placed her here tonight, in a black vest and white Oxford shirt, name tag reading Charlotte in modest serif font, a water pitcher growing heavy in her hand as she moved silently through Suite 7. The suite was small for the Obsidian Club's standards. Intimate, a single mahogany table stretched beneath a chandelier that cost more than she would make in 5 years. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Manhattan below, a universe of lights that seemed both impossibly close and forever distant. 6 men sat around that table. 5 wore suits that whispered wealth. The 6th wore panic poorly concealed beneath Italian tailoring. Charlotte had learned to read rooms the way other people read books. It was a skill born of invisibility. When you served water and cleared plates, when you existed in the peripheral vision of power, you learned to observe without being observed. You learned that the most important conversations happened when people forgot you were there. She had been refilling water glasses for 3 hours. Her feet ached in the cheap flats she wore. Her lower back burned from the double shift she had pulled before taking the train from Boston to Manhattan for this evening work. But her hands remained steady as she poured, her face remained neutral, and her mind remained sharp. Because Charlotte Bennett understood something these men did not. She understood every single word being spoken. The man at the head of the table was Nathaniel Sterling, 32 years old. Built Sterling Dynamics from an MIT dorm room into an $8 billion valuation in just 6 years. The financial press called him the Ice King. The tech world called him a genius. His employees called him ruthless. Charlotte called him terrified. She could see it in the micro-expressions he tried to hide. The slight tension in his jaw, the way his fingers pressed too hard against the table's edge, the controlled breathing of someone forcing calm they did not feel. Across from him sat Henri Beaumont, 60 years old, silver-haired, with the bearing of a man who had built long aerospace empires across 3 continents. Beaumont Aerospace was critical to Sterling's expansion into European markets. This meeting was supposed to be a formality, a handshake disguised as negotiation. It was becoming a disaster. Between them sat the translator, a young man named Kevin who looked like he might vomit at any moment. Kevin had arrived 45 minutes ago, emergency replacement for the actual translator who was currently in an ambulance somewhere vomiting blood. Charlotte had overheard that detail an hour ago, had filed it away in the growing catalog of observations she kept but never spoke. Henri Beaumont was speaking now. Rapid French, the kind spoken in Parisian boardrooms, loaded with idioms that required not just linguistic knowledge but cultural fluency. Je suis fatigué d'attendre, Beaumont said, his voice a low rumble of controlled anger. Vos erreurs logistiques révèlent un amateurisme inquiétant. Je m'attendais à plus de professionnalisme de la part d'une entreprise de votre réputation. Kevin the translator went pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his mouth opened, closed, opened again. Kevin managed. He says he's tired, and you're amateur? Something about heavy logistics? Charlotte's hand tightened on the water pitcher. That was not what Beaumont had said, not even close. Beaumont had said he was tired of waiting, that Sterling's logistical errors revealed alarming amateurism, that he had expected more professionalism from a company of their reputation. It was an insult, a serious one, but delivered with the door still open for recovery. Kevin had turned it into gibberish. Charlotte watched Nathaniel Sterling's face, watched the calculation happening behind those steel blue eyes. He did not speak French, could not know the translation was catastrophically wrong, but he could read the darkening expression on Beaumont's face. Tell him, Sterling said, voice controlled, projecting confidence that his body language betrayed, that we deeply value his time, that the delay was due to a medical emergency with my senior staff, and that we are prepared to offer 20% above market valuation as demonstration of our commitment to this partnership. Kevin swallowed hard, turned to Beaumont, opened his mouth. Nous, désolé, Kevin stammered. Vous, temps précieux, 20%, comme marché de légumes. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly. Kevin had just told Henri Beaumont that his precious time was worth 20%, like a vegetable market. He had compared one of Europe's most respected aerospace engineers to a street vendor selling produce. Beaumont's hands slammed down on the table. The sound cracked through the suite like a gunshot. Crystal water glasses jumped. Silverware rattled. The three French executives with Beaumont muttered angrily to each other. C'est une insulte! Beaumont's voice rose, controlled fury giving way to genuine rage. Vous me traitez comme un marchand de bazar, comme un vendeur de rue. Je pars immédiatement. Kevin looked like he might cry. He's talking about markets, sir. I think he's hungry? Charlotte stood frozen near the service station. She had been invisible her entire life. Invisible to the Georgetown professors who had praised her brilliance but could not help when she withdrew. Invisible to the hospital administrators who accepted her monthly payments without seeing her desperation. Invisible to every wealthy patron who had ever looked through her while she poured their water. Invisibility was safety. Invisibility was survival. But invisibility was also cowardice when the truth needed speaking. Henri Beaumont stood, buttoned his jacket with sharp, angry movements. J'ai pas, he said flatly. C'est une perte de temps. He was leaving. $4 billion walking toward the door. Nathaniel Sterling stood as well. For the first time that evening, his mask cracked. Charlotte saw genuine panic flash across his face, saw him searching for words in a language he did not speak, in a situation spiraling beyond his control. The silence stretched, agonizing, fatal. Charlotte's heart hammered against her ribs. Her palms were sweating. The water pitcher trembled slightly in her grip. She thought of her father, thought of James Bennett lying motionless in a hospital bed, machines breathing for him, monitors tracking the life he could not live. Thought of the $360,000 in medical debt that had consumed her entire existence for 2 years. Thought of what her father would do. James Bennett had been a CIA legal analyst, had spent 30 years investigating corporate espionage, patent theft, the hidden corruptions of international business. He had taught Charlotte that language was power. That truth spoken at the right moment could shatter empires. He had taught her that integrity meant nothing if you surrendered it when the cost grew too high. Charlotte set the water pitcher down on the side table. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. Monsieur Beaumont, she said, and her French was flawless. Accent perfect, diction precise. Permettez-moi de clarifier la situation. L'incompétence de traduction est personnelle, non institutionnelle. Monsieur Sterling respecte profondément votre héritage d'ingénierie et la réputation de Beaumont Aerospace. Every head in the room turned toward her. The silence that followed was different now. Not the silence of impending disaster, but the silence of shock, of disbelief. Owen Clark, Sterling's executive assistant, stood near the wall. His face went from confusion to fury in the space of a heartbeat. You, Owen hissed, stepping toward Charlotte. You're fired. Get out of here right now before I call security. Don't touch her. Nathaniel Sterling's voice cracked like a whip. Sharp. Absolute. Owen froze mid-step. Sterling was staring at Charlotte, really seeing her for the first time. She had messy brown hair pulled back in a utilitarian bun, a smudge of flour on her apron from the diner shift she had worked that morning, cheap shoes and exhaustion written in the shadows beneath her eyes. But she stood with a posture that did not belong to a server, spoke with an authority that did not match her name tag. Henri Beaumont had stopped his exit. He turned slowly, studying Charlotte with the intensity of a man reassessing his assumptions. Vous parlez français, mademoiselle? Beaumont's tone had shifted, curiosity replacing anger. Et pas le français ordinaire, c'est l'accent parisien, l'accent diplomatique. Charlotte met his gaze directly. Protocol said service staff did not make eye contact with guests. Protocol said she should be looking at the floor, apologizing, disappearing. She ignored protocol. J'ai étudié à l'Institut français de Washington, Charlotte replied. Mon père était analyste juridique pour le gouvernement américain. Diplomatie et questions internationales. My father was a legal analyst for the American government. Diplomacy and international affairs. Past tense. Was. The words tasted like ash, but she spoke them clearly. Beaumont's eyebrows rose. He walked back toward the table slowly. sat down, gestured to the empty chair beside Sterling. Vous comprenez l'ingénierie aérospatiale? He asked. Do you understand aerospace engineering? This was the test, the moment that would determine whether her intervention was salvation or simply a different flavor of disaster. Charlotte's mind raced through the documents she had read during her break earlier that evening. Discarded prospectus left on a table by careless executives. Technical specifications for a merger she had no business understanding. Except she did understand. Because her Georgetown thesis had been on energy infrastructure as diplomatic leverage. Because she had spent 2 years researching European aerospace companies and their role in clean energy transitions. Because she had a photographic memory that had once been her greatest academic asset and was now just another painful reminder of the life she had lost. J'ai lu votre prospectus ce matin, Charlotte said. Votre système de propulsion cryogénique pour le projet de nettoyage océanique était révolutionnaire. La configuration delta V avec refroidissement et hélium liquide représente une avancée majeure en efficacité énergétique. I read your prospectus this morning. Your cryogenic propulsion system for the ocean cleanup project was revolutionary. The delta V configuration with liquid helium cooling represents a major advance in energy efficiency. She watched Beaumont's face, watched the exact moment when skepticism shifted to interest. Asseyez-vous, Beaumont said, pointing to the translator's chair. Sit down. Charlotte hesitated. Her manager, Mr. Garrison, was somewhere in this building. If he found out she had spoken to a guest, let alone sat at a guest's table, she would be terminated immediately. This job paid $1,800 a month. She needed every dollar. But Nathaniel Sterling was looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, something between desperation and hope. Sit, Sterling said. Not a request, a command. Right now. Charlotte untied her apron, set it carefully on the service station. Underneath, she wore only the simple white Oxford and black slacks. She walked to the table on trembling legs and sat in the chair meant for a professional translator making 6 figures. She was a waitress with $360,000 in medical debt who had not slept more than 5 hours in the past week. But for the next 2 hours, she became something else entirely. The negotiation was intricate, technical, loaded with legal implications and financial structures that would have confused most people. Charlotte did not just translate the words, she translated the intent. When Sterling pushed too hard on equity distribution, Charlotte softened the phrasing in French to appeal to Beaumont's sense of legacy rather than profit. When Beaumont raised concerns about American regulatory frameworks, Charlotte explained Sterling's internal compliance policies with a clarity that Sterling himself seemed surprised by. She understood leverage, understood the unspoken dance of corporate warfare, understood that every conversation at this level was really 3 conversations happening simultaneously. The words being said, the meaning beneath those words, and the future relationship being constructed or destroyed by the space between. By 10 o'clock, Beaumont was laughing, actually laughing, sharing a story in rapid French about a disastrous negotiation in Munich 15 years ago. Charlotte translated it perfectly, capturing not just the words but the rhythm, the humor, the self-deprecating warmth that made Beaumont human rather than simply powerful. Sterling signed the preliminary merger agreement with Beaumont's Montblanc pen, $4 billion secured by a woman who made $11 an hour. The French delegation left with handshakes and promises of dinner in Paris. The suite door closed behind them. The silence that followed felt enormous. Charlotte stood immediately. Muscle memory from 2 years of service work. Clear the table, reset the room, disappear before anyone remembered you existed. Leave it, Sterling's voice stopped her. He was standing near the window now, Manhattan spreading below him like a kingdom made of light. His reflection in the glass looked tired, human in a way the business magazines never captured. Who are you? Sterling turned to face her. Who are you really, Charlotte Bennett? The way he said her name made it sound important, like it mattered. Charlotte's throat tightened. I'm just a server, Mr. Sterling. I should get back to work before my manager. Servers don't speak diplomatic French, Sterling interrupted. Servers don't know Delta V configurations and cryogenic propulsion systems. Servers don't negotiate $4 billion mergers. He walked toward her slowly, not threatening, just intense. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle, and she was the missing piece. Georgetown University, Charlotte said quietly. I was 1 semester away from my master's in international security studies. My thesis was on European energy policy and aerospace manufacturing. Was? The word hung between them. Charlotte looked down at her hands. They were red and rough from dishwater and cleaning chemicals. Hands that used to write academic papers. Hands that now scrubbed floors. My father is James Bennett, she said. He was a CIA legal analyst, 30 years investigating corporate crimes, patent theft, international espionage. He was good at his job, maybe too good. She could feel Sterling watching her, waiting. 25 years ago, my father worked with a man named Victor Blackwood, covert operation in Paris. They were investigating American aerospace companies selling patents to Chinese competitors. My father found evidence, real evidence. But before he could testify, Charlotte's voice cracked. She forced it steady. Blackwood flipped the narrative, made it look like my father was the traitor, like he was selling American intelligence. The night before my father's congressional hearing, his car went off the road. Traumatic brain injury. He's been in a coma for 2 years. Sterling's expression shifted. Victor Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Heavy Industries. Yes. Your father was investigating him? My father was going to destroy him, Charlotte said. So Blackwood destroyed my father first. We lost everything. The house, his pension, his reputation. I dropped out of Georgetown to keep him alive. $360,000 in medical debt. I work 3 shifts, diner in the morning, ride share in the afternoon, this in the evening. She laughed, but it sounded broken. And I still can't cover the interest on what we owe. Sterling was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer. Blackwood has been sabotaging my company for 6 months, Sterling said. Anonymous tips to regulators, leaked internal memos. My translator tonight, the one who ended up in an ambulance. Charlotte looked up sharply. That wasn't food poisoning, Sterling continued. That was ricin, trace amounts, enough to incapacitate, not kill. A warning. From Blackwood. From Blackwood. Sterling pulled out his phone, showed her a message. Anonymous number. 5 words. Your empire burns soon enough. Charlotte felt cold spreading through her chest. He knew about this meeting, Sterling said. Knew I was bringing my senior translator. Knew exactly how to sabotage it. That information was top secret, which means you have a leak, Charlotte finished. Sterling nodded grimly. He walked to his briefcase, pulled out a business card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. Sterling Dynamics, 50th floor. Nathaniel Sterling, Chief Executive Officer. He held it out to her. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, Sterling said. 50th floor. Charlotte stared at the card. Mr. Sterling, I have the morning shift at the diner. I can't just... You don't work at the diner anymore. Sterling's voice was absolute. You work for me. Title, Executive Strategic Liaison. Salary, name a number, triple it, and I'll double that. Charlotte's mind reeled. I don't understand. You want me to translate? I want you to help me destroy Victor Blackwood, Sterling said. The man who murdered your father's life is the same man trying to murder my company. We have a common enemy. I'm offering you a chance to fight back. Charlotte looked at the card in her hand, looked at this man who had built an empire but could not save it without her, looked at the city beyond the window, glittering and cruel and beautiful. She thought of her father, thought of James Bennett teaching her French at the kitchen table, teaching her that language was power, teaching her that integrity was the only thing no one could take unless you handed it over. I have nothing left to lose, Charlotte said quietly. He took my father. I want everything he has. Sterling stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, close enough to feel the intensity radiating off him like heat. You're not alone in this fight anymore, he said. Remember that. The air between them felt charged, electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. A knock on the door shattered the moment. Owen Clark entered without waiting for permission. His eyes went immediately to Charlotte, to the business card in her hand, to how close she stood to Sterling. Suspicion flashed across Owen's face, quickly hidden. Sir, Owen said, security team is ready for the facility sweep. Sterling nodded without looking away from Charlotte. Tell them I'll be down in 5 minutes. Owen's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Just a glance, but Charlotte caught it. Saw his hand tremble slightly as he silenced the notification. Saw the contact name before it disappeared. The gardener. Owen left. The door closed. Charlotte's mind was racing, but she kept her face neutral. Sterling turned back to her. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Don't be late. Charlotte nodded. Slipped the business card into her pocket. Started toward the door. Charlotte. She stopped. Turned back. Sterling was silhouetted against the window now, the city's lights making him look like something carved from shadow and ambition. Thank you, he said, for speaking when you didn't have to, for risking your for saving something that matters. Charlotte wanted to say, "You're welcome," wanted to say it was nothing, wanted to say something that matched the moment. Instead, she just nodded and left. The train back to Boston took 4 hours. Charlotte sat in the cheap seats, watching her reflection in the dark window. The card in her pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. Her phone buzzed. Email notification. Massachusetts General Hospital. Subject, patient account update. Charlotte's heart stopped. She opened it with shaking fingers. Your father's medical account has received a payment of $75,000 from Thornfield Trust. VIP suite upgrade process like private nursing staff authorized. Please contact administration to confirm new care protocols. Charlotte read it 3 times. She had not authorized any payment, had never heard of Thornfield Trust. She searched it on her phone. Cayman Islands Shell Corporation, registered 18 months ago, no public ownership information. Her blood turned to ice. She knew this pattern, had memorized every detail of her father's case file during 2 years of trying to clear his name. Victor Blackwood's offshore network included a dozen shell companies. Thornfield Holdings, Garden Ventures, shadow corporations designed to move money without leaving traces. Thornfield. This was not generosity. This was not help. This was a collar. Her phone buzzed again. Text message, blocked number. Congratulations on your promotion, Ms. Bennett. Your father rests peacefully in his new accommodations. Let us ensure it stays peaceful. Welcome to the game. Charlotte stared at the message until the screen went dark. She was trapped. Blackwood knew she had saved Sterling's deal, knew she had interfered, and now he controlled the one thing she could not lose. Her father's life hung by a thread Blackwood could cut whenever he wanted. The train pulled into South Station at 2 in the morning. Charlotte walked through empty streets to her studio apartment, climbed 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken, unlocked 3 locks on a door that barely hung straight in its frame. Inside, the walls were covered with medical bills, hospital statements, discharge summaries, Georgetown transcripts showing the dean's list she had made every semester until she vanished. And there, above her desk, a photograph. James Bennett in his State Department uniform, standing beside a younger Charlotte at her Georgetown acceptance day. Both of them smiling like the future was something bright and certain. Charlotte sat on her bed, did not bother turning on the light, just sat in the darkness, holding Sterling's business card in one hand and her phone in the other. 8 a.m. tomorrow, a new job, a new life, and a trap closing around her that she could not escape. She thought about calling Sterling, warning him, telling him that Blackwood already knew, already had leverage, already owned her, but if she called, if she confessed, Sterling would lock down the hospital, would send security, would try to protect her father, and Blackwood would kill him before Sterling's men reached the door. Charlotte lay back on her bed, stared at the ceiling, watched shadows move in the ambient light from the street. "What would you do, Dad?" she whispered to the empty room. But James Bennett could not answer. Could not tell her that integrity meant nothing if you were too afraid to defend it. Could not tell her that real power came from refusing to surrender what defined you. Could not tell her that she was stronger than she believed. So Charlotte made her choice alone. Tomorrow she would walk into Sterling Dynamics, would smile and play her part, would pretend she was not drowning, would pretend she had not already lost before the game even started. Tomorrow she would save a company while destroying herself. Tomorrow she would be invisible again. But tonight, just for tonight, she let herself cry. Because Charlotte Bennett understood something the powerful never would. The quietest person in the room was always the most dangerous. And when the invisible finally spoke, the world had no choice but to listen. Even if speaking meant dying, even if the cost was everything, even if she had to betray the only person who had ever believed in her to save the only person she had left to love. Outside her window, Manhattan glowed in the distance. Sterling Tower rose above everything else, a monument to ambition and power, and the illusion that success could protect you from the past. Charlotte closed her eyes. 8 hours until her new life began. 8 hours until she learned whether salvation and destruction were really different things. 8 hours until she discovered that some traps were designed not to catch you, but to make you choose which part of yourself to sacrifice. And Victor Blackwood had built the perfect trap, because he understood what Charlotte was only beginning to learn. The most devastating weapon was not a gun or a bomb. It was hope, and he had just given her enough hope to hang herself. The Sterling Dynamics Tower did not simply rise from Manhattan bedrock. It erupted. 53 floors of glass and steel that caught morning light like a blade, reflecting the city back at itself in fractured, glittering pieces. Charlotte Bennett stood on the sidewalk at 7:55 in the morning, looking up at a building she had only ever seen from the outside, from below, from the perspective of someone who did not matter. Today she would walk through the front doors. Today she would stop being invisible. She wore the same thrift store blazer from the night before, black, slightly too large in the shoulders, with a small stain near the hem that she had tried and failed to remove. Underneath, a white blouse she had ironed in her apartment at 6 a.m., hands shaking from exhaustion and something deeper than exhaustion. Fear, maybe, or the recognition that fear was now a luxury she could not afford. The lobby was cathedral vast, marble floors polished to mirror brightness, a water feature along one wall that probably cost more than her father's entire medical debt. Security guards in suits that fit better than anything Charlotte owned. One of them looked at her, really looked, the kind of look that measured and dismissed in the same instant. Charlotte lifted her chin, walked to the security desk with a confidence that felt like glass, fragile and sharp-edged. "Charlotte Bennett," and she said, "for Nathaniel Sterling, 50th floor." The guard checked his tablet. His eyebrows rose fractionally. He printed a visitor badge, slid it across the marble counter. "Executive elevator. Far right, Mr. Sterling is expecting you." The badge felt heavy in her hand, like a lie made physical. The elevator was empty. Charlotte watched herself in the mirrored walls as it climbed. 50 floors in 40 seconds. Her reflection multiplied into infinity, 1,000 versions of herself all rising together, all wearing the same uncertain expression. Her father's voice came to her unbidden, a memory from childhood. Charlotte at 12, nervous before a debate competition, convinced she would fail. "You belong anywhere you decide to belong, Charlie girl. Confidence is not arrogance. It is earned competence worn lightly." But her father was not here, would never be here again, not the way he had been. James Bennett existed now only in the gap between heartbeats, kept alive by machines and stubbornness and Charlotte's monthly payments that barely covered the interest on impossible debt. The elevator opened. Chaos greeted her. The 50th floor was all glass walls and open concept workstations, people moving with urgent purpose, phones ringing, conversations overlapping into a symphony of controlled crisis. The kind of environment where millions of dollars moved on the strength of a single email, where careers ended before lunch and fortunes shifted between coffee breaks. Charlotte stepped out. No one looked at her, everyone was too busy being important. Owen Clark stood near the reception desk, Sterling's executive assistant. 35, sharp suit, sharper eyes. Charlotte had watched him last night at the Obsidian Club, had seen the way his hand trembled when his phone buzzed, had seen the contact name before he could hide it, the gardener. Now Owen saw her. His expression shifted through surprise to calculation to something like contempt, all in the space of a breath. "Miss Bennett," Owen's voice dripped false courtesy, "I am genuinely shocked you actually showed up. Mr. Sterling is waiting. Try not to embarrass yourself." He turned without waiting for response. Charlotte followed him through the maze of glass and ambition, past offices where people made decisions that would ripple across continents, past conference rooms where the future was being negotiated by people who believed they controlled it. Owen knocked once on a door at the far end, did not wait for answer, opened it. Nathaniel Sterling stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, Manhattan spreading beneath him like a kingdom he owned but could not control. "I do not care about the Munich office's concerns," Sterling said, voice cold enough to cut. "Beaumont Aerospace is ours now. Make it happen, or I will find someone who can." He ended the call, turned, looked at Charlotte. Something in his expression shifted, softened maybe, or just recognized her as human rather than asset. "Charlotte, you came. You gave me a very compelling reason to," Charlotte said. Sterling gestured to Owen. "That will be all." Owen's jaw tightened. "Sir, I should brief you on the security protocols for—" "Out." One word. Absolute authority. Owen left, closing the door harder than necessary. Sterling waited until the footsteps faded. Then he moved to his desk, pulled up something on his computer screen. "Thomas Hayes is in intensive care at Mount Sinai," Sterling said. "Toxicology confirmed ricin poisoning. Small dose, precisely calculated. Enough to incapacitate for days, not enough to kill." "Blackwood sent a message," Charlotte said quietly. "Blackwood sent a threat." Sterling turned the monitor toward her. Hospital photos, charts showing toxic levels. And he knew exactly when and where to deliver it. That meeting last night was classified. Only 3 people in this company knew the details. He pulled up an organizational chart. 3 faces: Nathaniel Sterling, CEO himself; Evelyn Vance, Chief Operating Officer, 52, severe with a reputation for ruthless efficiency; Owen Clark, Executive Assistant, the man who had just left this office radiating barely contained hostility. "One of them is feeding Blackwood information," Sterling said. "I need to know which one." Charlotte studied the faces. "You think it's Owen." "I think Owen is weak, ambitious, afraid, all qualities Blackwood would exploit." Sterling leaned against his desk. "But I need proof before I move. If I am wrong, if I burn the wrong person, Blackwood goes underground and I never get another chance." "So you want me to find your mole?" "I want you to be invisible," Sterling said. "You have spent 2 years being furniture in rooms of power. You know how to watch when people think no one is watching. You know how to listen when people think no one is listening." He was right. Charlotte had perfected the art of non-existence, had learned to move through spaces without leaving impressions, to hear conversations not meant for her, to understand the architecture of power from the outside looking in. Now Sterling was asking her to weaponize her invisibility. "What is my cover?" Charlotte asked. "European integration consultant, low level, temporary, here to help with the Beaumont merger paperwork." Sterling handed her an employee badge, her photo from last night, somehow already printed. "Owen will see you as a diversity hire, non-threatening, probably sleeping with me to keep the job." Charlotte flinched. Sterling saw it. "I know," he said quietly. "It is ugly, but it will make you invisible to him. And invisible is what we need." Charlotte took the badge, her name in sans serif typeface, a barcode that would open doors she had never been allowed through. "There is something else you need to know," Sterling said. He pulled up another holographic display. "Technical schematics, energy grids, something beautiful and complex and revolutionary." "Project Aurora," Sterling continued, "distributed clean energy network. If it works, it eliminates fossil fuel dependency within a decade, renders the entire oil industry obsolete." Charlotte stared at the designs, recognized elements from her Georgetown thesis, saw the brilliance in the engineering. "Blackwood's company is heavily invested in traditional energy," she said. "Blackwood's empire collapses if Aurora succeeds," Sterling confirmed, "which is why he has been sabotaging us for months, and why this Friday's board demonstration is critical. If Aurora fails publicly, our stock crashes. Blackwood buys controlling interest during the collapse. Everything I have built becomes his." The stakes crystallized. This was not just corporate warfare. This was the future of energy, of climate, of whether humanity transitioned away from the fuels killing the planet or stayed locked in the systems making men like Blackwood rich. "Friday," Charlotte repeated, 4 days. 4 days to find the mole, 4 days to secure Aurora, 4 days to destroy Blackwood before he destroys us. Sterling looked at her with an intensity that felt physical, like he was trying to see past her skin into whatever lay beneath. "I am trusting you, Charlotte, more than I have trusted anyone in years. Do not make me regret it." Charlotte thought about the text message on her phone, thought about Blackwood's grip around her father's throat, thought about the trap closing around her with each word Sterling spoke. "I won't," she lied. Charlotte's desk was positioned near the executive break room. "Perfect surveillance point," Sterling had said, "close enough to observe, far enough to be dismissed." The desk itself was small, cheap laminate trying to look like wood. A computer that took 3 minutes to boot up. No window view. The kind of workspace that communicated exactly how little she mattered. Charlotte sat down, logged into the system with credentials Owen had given her, radiating annoyance with every keystroke. Around her, Sterling Dynamics hummed with purpose. Analysts rushing between meetings, engineers arguing over code on massive monitors, executives making decisions that would affect thousands of lives with the casual certainty of gods who had forgotten their own mortality. Charlotte watched, listened, learned. Owen Clark kept his office door closed, came out only for coffee, which he made himself, never asking Charlotte despite her proximity. She watched him through the glass walls, watched the way he checked his phone obsessively, watched the tension in his shoulders, the way he startled at unexpected sounds. This was a man carrying weight. At 11:30, Owen emerged for his third coffee run. Charlotte stood, stretched, wandered toward the break room as if by coincidence. "Mr. Clark," she said, voice carefully deferential, "can I get you anything? I was just making myself some tea and—" "I am perfectly capable of making my own coffee, Miss Bennett." Owen's tone could have frozen water. Perhaps you should focus on whatever it is Sterling is actually paying you for. Assuming there is anything beyond decoration. The insult was designed to sting, to establish hierarchy, to make her small. Charlotte smiled meekly. Of course, I apologize. She returned to her desk, but she had seen what she needed. Owen's phone face up on the counter while he poured coffee. The screen had lit with a notification. Just for a second. Just long enough. A message preview from a contact with no name. Just an emoji. A small green plant. The message read, "The weed has been planted. Harvest scheduled Friday dawn." Charlotte's pulse spiked. She kept her face neutral, eyes on her computer screen, but her mind was racing. The weed has been planted. Sabotage already in place. Harvest Friday dawn. The board demonstration. And that emoji. A plant. A garden reference. The gardener. She had him. Charlotte worked through lunch, ate a protein bar from her bag while pulling up everything she could access about Owen Clark. Employment history, performance reviews, financial records that were technically private but accessible if you knew where to look in the company system. The picture that emerged was damning. Owen had started at Sterling Dynamics 3 years ago. Good performance initially. Competent, detail-oriented, but 6 months ago something had shifted. His work quality had declined slightly. Nothing dramatic, just enough to be noticeable if you were looking. And his spending had increased dramatically. Charlotte found rent records. Owen lived in a Tribeca loft, $5,200 a month, double what his salary could reasonably support. She found credit card statements, public record from a debt lawsuit, 3 cards maxed out, $180,000 in personal debt. She found social media accounts that had been wiped clean 8 months ago. Every post deleted, every photo removed. The digital equivalent of a man trying to erase his past. Charlotte sat back in her cheap chair, thought about desperation, about what people would do when the weight became too heavy to carry alone. Owen was trapped. Blackwood had found him in that trap and offered a way out. Money to clear the debt, security in exchange for betrayal. The same thing Blackwood was doing to her right now. Charlotte pulled out her phone, opened the text message again. Your father rests peacefully in his new accommodations. Let us ensure it stays peaceful. She had to tell Sterling, had to show him the evidence about Owen, had to expose the mole before Friday. But if she exposed Owen, Blackwood would know, would understand that Charlotte had chosen Sterling over her father, and James Bennett would die. Charlotte closed her eyes, pressed her palms against them until she saw stars. There had to be another way. Some path through this that did not end in choosing which part of herself to destroy. She just had to find it. At 6 p.m., Sterling summoned her back to his office. He looked exhausted. Tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, the carefully constructed armor of the CEO cracking to reveal the human underneath. Tell me you found something, Sterling said. Charlotte told him about Owen, about the debt, about the message she had seen, about the garden emoji and what it implied. Sterling listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. The gardener, he finally said. Blackwood used that signature on an operation in Berlin 8 years ago. Corporate espionage case. He walked away clean, but the intelligence community knew. Your father knew, Charlotte said softly. Sterling looked at her sharply, then understanding crossed his face. Your father was investigating Blackwood when he was framed, Sterling said. The gardener was part of that case. Charlotte nodded. Garden Ventures, LLC, Thornfield Holdings. Shell companies designed to move money without traces. Blackwood builds gardens, plants seeds, harvests when they grow. And Owen is the seed he planted in my company. 6 months ago, Charlotte confirmed, right when Owen's debt became unmanageable. Blackwood found him, owned him, used him. Sterling stood, paced to the window, looked out at a city that did not care about their small war. If we fire Owen now, Blackwood goes dark, Sterling said. We lose our chance. So we do not fire him, Charlotte heard herself say. We feed him something he cannot resist sharing. Sterling turned. What did you have in mind? Charlotte had been thinking about this all afternoon, turning the problem over like a puzzle box, looking for the hidden mechanism. We create a false report, she said. Make it look like Aurora has a critical flaw. Thermal cascade failure that will cause catastrophic meltdown during the demonstration. Plant it where Owen will find it. He sends it to Blackwood, Sterling continued, catching her thread. Blackwood shorts our stock, betting on public failure. But Aurora works perfectly, Charlotte finished. Stock soars. Blackwood loses billions trying to cover his short position. And we have him on securities fraud. Sterling smiled. It was the first time Charlotte had seen him actually smile. It transformed his face, made him look younger, more human. You have a devious mind, Charlotte Bennett. I learned from watching powerful men destroy my father, Charlotte said. I learned all their tricks. They spent the next 2 days building the trap. Sterling had a secure room in the basement, soundproofed, no windows, the kind of space where classified work happened away from curious eyes. Charlotte and Sterling worked side by side, drafting a technical report detailed enough to be convincing. They made it look like someone had tried to hide it, buried it in an archived folder marked obsolete testing protocols. Owen's paranoia would drive him to check old files, to search for hidden truths. He would find this report and think he had discovered something valuable, something worth selling. They worked late. Midnight became 2 a.m., became 4 a.m. Coffee turned to exhaustion, turned to a strange intimacy born of shared purpose. At 3:30 in the morning, Charlotte's hands cramped on the keyboard. She leaned back, rubbing her eyes. Here. Sterling set a cup beside her. Hazelnut latte, 2 creams, her exact order from the coffee run he had made hours ago. He had remembered. Thank you, Charlotte said quietly. Sterling sat in the chair beside her, not across the desk in the position of power, but next to her, equal. After this is over, Sterling said, I am sending your father to Zurich, best neurological institute in the world. I had my medical team review his case. They think there are new protocols, experimental treatments. A chance. Charlotte's throat closed. Why would you do that? Because you are saving my life's work. Because your father deserves better than what Blackwood did to him. Because I do not leave debts unpaid. He looked at her, really looked. Not at an employee or an asset or a tool to be used. At Charlotte, the woman who made $11 an hour and carried $360,000 in debt and had still spoken up when silence would have been safer. You are extraordinary, Sterling said softly. Charlotte felt heat rise in her face, felt something dangerous stirring in her chest, something that felt like hope, or maybe something worse than hope. She was trapped, was lying to him with every breath, was going to betray him because Blackwood had found the one lever that would move her, and Sterling was looking at her like she mattered. I should get back to work, Charlotte managed. Sterling held her gaze a moment longer, then nodded, stood, went back to his side of the desk. But something had shifted between them, something Charlotte could not afford. Friday morning arrived too quickly. The Aurora demonstration was scheduled for 9 a.m. Board members were flying in from across the country. Press credentials had been issued. The stock market was watching. Charlotte had not slept, had spent the night staring at her apartment ceiling, thinking about her father, about Blackwood, about the choice she would have to make. Her phone buzzed at 6 a.m. Text message. Blocked number. Reminder. Aurora must fail today. If it succeeds, your father's life support experiences malfunction at 6:01 tomorrow morning. Choose wisely, Charlotte. Choose family. Charlotte sat on the edge of her bed, phone shaking in her hand. She had planted the false report. Owen had found it, had sent it to Blackwood exactly as they had predicted. Blackwood thought Aurora would fail, had positioned himself to profit from the disaster. But Aurora would not fail. It would succeed, and Blackwood would be exposed, and Charlotte's father would die, unless she made it fail, unless she uploaded the virus Blackwood had sent her. Real sabotage to replace the fake sabotage, unless she chose her father over everything Sterling believed she was. Charlotte opened her laptop. The virus code sat in her email. Simple, elegant, designed to cause exactly the kind of cascade failure they had faked in the false report. All she had to do was upload it to the Aurora control system. All she had to do was become exactly what Blackwood needed her to be. All she had to do was destroy the man who had given her hope. Charlotte thought about her father, about James Bennett teaching her that integrity was the only thing they could not take unless you handed it over. What would he want her to do? Save him by destroying herself? Or save herself by letting him die? Charlotte closed the laptop, got dressed, took the train to Manhattan. She would decide when the moment came. She would decide when she had to press the button. She would decide which part of herself to sacrifice. But before the demonstration, there was the gala. The Metropolitan Museum of Art transformed every December into a cathedral of wealth and influence. The Tech Innovation Summit, an evening where senators mingled with venture capitalists, where the future was negotiated over champagne and small talk, where appearance mattered more than truth. Sterling had told Charlotte she needed to attend, needed to be seen at his side, part of the performance. A stylist had arrived at her apartment at 4 p.m., had brought a dress that cost more than Charlotte made in 6 months. Midnight blue silk that fit like it had been designed for her body specifically. Diamonds that were probably insured for more than her father's entire medical debt. Charlotte looked at herself in the mirror and did not recognize the woman looking back. She looked powerful, elegant, like someone who belonged in rooms where decisions were made. She looked like a beautiful lie. The car Sterling sent picked her up at 6. Black town car with a driver who opened her door and called her Miss Bennett like it was a title she had earned. Sterling was waiting at the museum entrance. Tuxedo that probably cost 5 figures. But when he saw Charlotte, his expression shifted into something unguarded. "You look," Sterling stopped, started again. "You look extraordinary." Charlotte's heart did something complicated. "Thank you." He offered his arm. She took it. They climbed the museum steps together, cameras flashing like lightning, photographers shouting questions they ignored. Inside was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers and marble columns, and people who shaped the world wearing their power like jewelry. Sterling introduced her to senators, to CEOs, to people whose names she had only ever seen in headlines. And he introduced her not as his assistant or his translator, but as Charlotte Bennett, strategic consultant, like she was someone, like she mattered. Charlotte played her part, smiled at the right moments, translated a conversation with a German automotive executive, charmed a Supreme Court justice's wife, but her eyes kept scanning the crowd, looking for him. And then she saw Victor Blackwood. He stood near the Temple of Dender, massive and silver-haired, holding a scotch like it was a weapon. When their eyes met across the gallery, he smiled, raised his glass in a toast that looked like a threat. Charlotte excused herself, told Sterling she needed the restroom, walked away before he could see her hands shaking. She did not go to the restroom. She walked to a shadowed alcove near the Egyptian wing. Knew Blackwood would follow. He did. "Miss Bennett," Blackwood's voice was gravel and ice. "You look beautiful, though I suppose anything is an improvement over a waitress uniform." "Stay away from my father." "I am his benefactor," Blackwood said. "That VIP suite is expensive. Would be tragic if funding disappeared, or if the nursing staff became negligent." Charlotte's hands curled into fists. "What do you want?" "You know what I want. That file Owen sent me, the thermal cascade report." "Clever forgery. Did you write it or did Sterling?" Charlotte went cold. He knew, had known all along it was fake. "Here is how this works," Blackwood continued. "You are going to upload this." He held out a USB drive. "Real virus, real sabotage. Aurora fails spectacularly in front of the board and press. Stock crashes. I buy Sterling Dynamics for pennies. And your father continues breathing." "I cannot," Charlotte whispered. "Nate trusts me. And your father trusts you to keep him alive." Blackwood stepped closer. "Choose wisely, Charlotte. You have until 6 a.m. tomorrow. Upload the virus or the machines turn off. Family or ambition, love or career. Make your choice." He walked away, left Charlotte trembling in the shadows. She felt hands on her shoulders, spun around. Sterling stood there, concern on his face. "Charlotte, you have been gone 20 minutes. Are you okay?" Charlotte looked at him, at this man who had given her a chance when she had nothing, who looked at her like she was more than her circumstances, who trusted her. "I'm fine," she lied, "just overwhelmed." Sterling studied her face. "Come with me." He led her through the museum to a balcony overlooking Central Park. The city spread below them, infinite and glittering. "I know I am not easy to work for," Sterling said quietly. "I know I have built walls, but you are different, Charlotte. When you spoke up at the Obsidian Club, you saw me powerless. And you helped anyway. Not for money, not for advancement, because it was right." He turned to face her, close enough that she could see the vulnerability in his eyes. "I trust you," he said, "more than I have trusted anyone in years." Charlotte felt tears burning. He was handing her his heart, and she was holding a knife. Sterling reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, intimate. "Charlotte," he said softly, and then he kissed her. It was not demanding, not aggressive, just soft and questioning and full of a hope that broke Charlotte's heart into pieces. She kissed him back, let herself have this one moment of pretending everything was not falling apart. Let herself believe she could be the woman he thought she was. When they pulled apart, Sterling smiled, actually smiled. "I have been wanting to do that for days," he admitted. Charlotte could not speak, could not tell him the truth, could not destroy this moment even though she knew it was built on lies. "I need to go." she finally managed. "I need to check something for tomorrow's presentation." Sterling frowned. "Now it is midnight. I want everything perfect." Charlotte stepped back, away from his warmth, away from the impossible future his eyes promised. "I will see you tomorrow morning." She ran before he could stop her. Ran before she broke completely. 2:30 a.m. Sterling Dynamics War Room. Charlotte sat alone with her laptop, the virus code glowing on the screen, the upload button waiting, clock in the corner, 3:47 a.m., 2 hours and 13 minutes until Blackwood's deadline. Charlotte thought about her father, about 11-year-old Charlotte watching James Bennett work late into the night, asking why he worked so hard for people who did not appreciate it. It is not about money, Charlie girl. It is about mirror integrity. Real power is refusing to surrender what defines you. Integrity, honor, truth. They cannot take those unless you hand them over. Never give them away. Not for money, not for safety, not even for love. Charlotte looked at the virus code, looked at her father's photo on her phone, made her choice. She deleted the virus, permanently, emptied the trash, sat back. Her father had taught her that integrity was the only thing that mattered, had sacrificed everything for that principle, would not want her to abandon it now, not even to save him. Charlotte drafted an email to Sterling, attached evidence of Blackwood's threats, set it to send at 6 a.m. if she did not cancel it. Then she called Massachusetts General. "This is Charlotte Bennett. I need to request an emergency transfer for James Bennett to Mount Sinai, immediate. That requires authorization from the account holder, Miss Bennett. I am his daughter. I have medical power of attorney. Current account holder is Thornfield Trust. They must approve all transfers." The line went dead. Charlotte stared at her phone. The trap had closed completely. She had no power, no control. Blackwood had positioned himself as legal guardian through his payment. She could not protect her father, could not save him, could only wait for 6 a.m. and watch him die. Her phone buzzed. Text message, 5:59 a.m. "Wrong choice, Charlotte. Say goodbye." Charlotte collapsed, pressed her hands against her mouth to keep from screaming. She had chosen integrity, and it had cost her everything. 6 a.m., Massachusetts General Hospital, room 407, alarm sounds, flatline tone, James Bennett's monitors going dark, nurses rushing, chaos. And Charlotte, alone in a basement office in Manhattan, watching her world end. She had saved Sterling. She had saved Aurora. She had saved her own soul and killed her father. Some choices, Charlotte understood now, did not have right answers. Some choices only had different flavors of loss. And she had just learned the price of being the person her father raised her to be. The cost was everything. The cost was him. 6:02 a.m. Massachusetts General Hospital. The flatline alarm screamed through room 407 like the end of the world contained in electronic sound. Nurses ran through antiseptic corridors, their footsteps a desperate percussion against linoleum that had seen too much death. Lead nurse Patricia burst through the door, saw James Bennett's monitors dark, saw the ventilator unplugged, cord lying on the floor like a snake that had just struck, saw a maintenance worker in the corner, baseball cap pulled low, mumbling apologies. "Wrong room," the man said, voice rough. "Was supposed to disconnect old equipment in 408. My mistake." Patricia did not waste time on anger. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, reconnecting the ventilator, checking vitals, calling for the crash cart even though she knew it was not needed. The monitors flickered, stabilized. James Bennett's heart rhythm returned, steady and strong, completely unaware of how close it had come to stopping forever. Dr. Margaret Chen arrived 30 seconds later, white coat flying behind her like wings. "What happened?" "Someone unplugged the ventilator," Patricia said. "Maintenance worker. Said he had the wrong room." Chen's eyes went hard. "Get security. Lock down this floor. No one enters or exits without biometric clearance. And get that maintenance worker's name." But when they looked, the maintenance worker was gone. Security footage would later show a man in a work uniform entering through the service entrance at 5:58 a.m. No badge scan, no identification. Just a person who understood how hospitals worked in the pre-dawn hours when staff was tired and security was thinnest. The footage would show him leaving at 6:03 a.m., walking calmly to a parking garage 3 blocks away where the cameras mysteriously stopped working at 5:45. The man would never be identified, but the hit was clear. Victor Blackwood had sent someone to kill James Bennett, had given the order at exactly 6 a.m. when Charlotte failed to upload the virus. The contractor had been incompetent, had gone to the wrong room first, had given Charlotte 3 extra minutes she did not know she had. 3 minutes that saved her father's life. 6:15 a.m. Sterling Dynamics Tower. Nathaniel Sterling sat in his office reading an email that had just arrived. Sent by Charlotte at 3 a.m., programmed to deliver at 6 unless she canceled it. She had not canceled it. The email contained everything. Blackwood's threatening texts, evidence of the Thornfield Trust payment, screenshots of the virus code Blackwood had sent, a full confession of the trap she had been caught in, and at the bottom, a single line. I chose you over my father. I chose integrity over survival. I am sorry I lied. I am sorry I was not stronger. But I could not become what he needed me to be, not even to save the person I loved most. Sterling read it 3 times, felt something crack in his chest. Charlotte had been trapped from the beginning, had carried this weight alone, had made an impossible choice, and chosen him, chosen Aurora, chosen the future over her own father's life. And Sterling had never known. He grabbed his phone, called Charlotte's number. It went straight to voicemail, called Massachusetts General, got transferred to Dr. Chen. This is Nathaniel Sterling. I am calling about James Bennett. I am sending a private security team to his room immediately. Armed protection. No one enters without my personal authorization. Mr. Sterling, there was an incident this morning. Someone attempted to disconnect his ventilator. Sterling's blood went cold. Is he alive? Yes, but barely. We have already locked down the floor, but additional security would be welcome. Sterling was already moving, grabbing his jacket, calling his head of security. Rollins, get a team to Massachusetts General right now. James Bennett, room 407. Full protection detail. No one gets near him. I do not care if they claim to be the president. No one. He ran to the elevator, pressed the button for the 50th floor lobby, his mind racing through scenarios. Charlotte thought her father was dead, thought she had sacrificed him for nothing. She would be destroyed. The board presentation was in less than 3 hours, the most important demonstration of Sterling's career. The future of clean energy hanging in the balance. And all Sterling could think about was finding Charlotte. 7:30 a.m. Charlotte's apartment. Charlotte sat on her bathroom floor, back against the cold tile, phone in her hand. She had called the hospital 17 times. No one would tell her anything. Patient privacy laws. She was not listed as next of kin anymore. Thornfield Trust had that designation now. She had called Blackwood's number. It was disconnected. She had nowhere to go, no way to know if her father was alive or dead, no way to undo what she had done. Her phone buzzed. Sterling calling for the 8th time. Charlotte could not answer, could not face him, could not tell him she had been lying from the moment she walked into his building. She let it go to voicemail. Sterling's voice rough with worry. Charlotte, where are you? I got your email. I know everything. Your father is alive. Do you hear me? He is alive. There was an attempt, but he is safe now. I have security with him. He is breathing. He is safe. Call me back, please. Charlotte listened to the message 4 times. Her father was alive. She had not killed him. Integrity had not cost her everything. Charlotte stood on shaking legs, looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. She looked like she had aged 10 years overnight. Eyes red, face pale. The expensive dress from the gala crumpled on her bedroom floor like shed skin. She got in the shower, let the water run until it went cold, got dressed in clean clothes, black pants, white blouse. The uniform of someone trying to hold herself together. Her phone rang again. Sterling, this time she answered. Nate. Charlotte. Relief flooded his voice. Where are you? Are you okay? My apartment. I am coming in. The presentation. Forget the presentation. I am sending a car for you. No. Charlotte's voice was steadier than she felt. I will be there. 9 a.m. I will run the demonstration like we planned. Charlotte, you do not have to. Yes, I do. She closed her eyes. I made a choice. Now I have to see it through. She ended the call before Sterling could argue. 8:45 a.m., Sterling Dynamics boardroom. The room was already full. 20 board members in suits that cost more than cars. Press in the observation gallery. Cameras set up to live stream to financial networks. Stock ticker on the side display showing Sterling Dynamics holding steady, unaware of the chaos about to unfold. Owen Clark stood in the corner, practically vibrating with anticipation. He had seen the fake thermal cascade report, had sent it to Blackwood, knew that in 15 minutes Aurora would fail spectacularly, knew his payoff was coming. Sterling stood at the podium, looking calm, looking controlled, looking nothing like a man whose entire world had nearly collapsed overnight. Charlotte arrived at 8:50. She looked terrible. But she walked into that boardroom with her head high, tablet in hand, and took her position near the Aurora prototype. Sterling caught her eye, mouthed, "Are you okay?" Charlotte nodded, a lie, but a necessary one. The Aurora prototype sat in the center of the room, sleek titanium cylinder, roughly the size of a refrigerator, humming with contained power. This was not just technology. This was revolution. The end of oil's stranglehold on human civilization. The beginning of an energy democracy that could save the planet. Or it was an $8 billion company's death rattle. Everything depended on the next 12 minutes. At 9 a.m. exactly, Sterling began. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, distinguished guests, today we demonstrate not just technology but transformation. Project Aurora represents the culmination of 6 years of research, $2 billion in development, and a vision for a world where clean energy is not aspirational but inevitable. He explained the technology, distributed grid architecture, quantum battery storage, efficiency ratings that made fossil fuels obsolete. His voice was steady, confident, gave no indication that his company hung by a thread. Board member Whitmore, the one secretly on Blackwood's payroll, raised his hand. "Mr. Sterling, we have heard troubling reports. Thermal instability, cascade failures. How do you respond to concerns that Aurora is not ready for deployment?" Sterling's eyes flicked to Owen for just a fraction of a second. "Baseless rumors from competitors who understand that Aurora ends their business model. Shall we demonstrate?" He nodded to Charlotte. "Miss Bennett, initiate startup sequence." Charlotte's finger hovered over the activation button on her tablet. This was the moment. The fulcrum point. Everything that had happened led here. If she pressed this button, one of three things would happen. Aurora would work perfectly because she had not uploaded Blackwood's virus. Sterling would triumph. Blackwood would lose billions on his short position. And Charlotte would have saved the day. Or Aurora would fail anyway because Owen had found another way to sabotage it. Sterling would be destroyed, Blackwood would win, and Charlotte's sacrifice would mean nothing. Or something else entirely would happen. Something none of them had predicted. Charlotte looked at Sterling, saw the trust in his eyes, the absolute certainty that she would not betray him. She pressed the button. The Aurora prototype came to life. The hum intensified, grew to a pitch that vibrated in Charlotte's chest. The lights in the boardroom flickered once, twice, then stabilized. The monitors displayed readouts that made no sense to most people in the room. But Charlotte understood them, and so did Sterling. Energy output, 103% of projected capacity. Thermal stability, 99.8%. Efficiency index, optimal across all parameters. It worked perfectly. The room erupted in gasps and spontaneous applause. The stock ticker shot upward. Green arrows, percentage gains climbing. Sterling Dynamics stock jumped 18% in 30 seconds. Sterling turned to Charlotte, pride and relief and something deeper than both shining in his eyes. Perfectly executed. Owen's face had gone gray. He was staring at the monitors like they were showing him his own death. Which, in a way, they were. Charlotte exhaled, felt the tension that had been crushing her for days finally release. She had done it, had saved Sterling without destroying herself, had chosen integrity and somehow survived the choice. For approximately 45 seconds, Charlotte believed she had won. Then the boardroom doors exploded open. 4 police officers, 2 FBI agents, and at the front, a woman in a severe suit with a badge that read Special Agent Rachel Ford. Everyone froze. "We have a warrant for arrest," Ford announced, voice carrying authority that silenced the room instantly. Sterling stepped forward. "On what grounds? For whom?" Ford's eyes swept the room, landed on Charlotte. "Charlotte Ann Bennett, you are under arrest for corporate espionage, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, and attempted sabotage of critical infrastructure." The words hit Charlotte like physical blows. This was not possible. This was not happening. "That is absurd," Sterling said, his voice rising. "Miss Bennett is my employee. She just successfully demonstrated Aurora. She saved this company." "Mr. Sterling, we received an anonymous tip this morning with comprehensive digital evidence." Ford pulled out a folder. "Wire transfer of $500,000 from Thornfield Trust to an offshore account in Miss Bennett's name. Timestamp 4 a.m. this morning." Charlotte's knees went weak. "I never received any money. That is a lie." "The money paid for your father's VIP medical suite," Ford continued. "Do you deny receiving that benefit?" Charlotte could not deny it. It was true. Blackwood had paid the hospital, had used that payment to trap her. Owen Clark stepped forward, his moment, his performance. Sir, I tried to warn you, Owen said, concern painted expertly across his face. I documented her unauthorized server access, her late-night intrusions into classified files. A waitress with aerospace expertise? She was too perfect. Blackwood planted her from the beginning. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Owen was the actual mole, the actual traitor. But he was using this moment to paint himself as the vigilant protector who had tried to warn Sterling. Sterling looked at the evidence folder in Ford's hand, looked at Charlotte, and Charlotte saw something terrible happen in his eyes. Doubt, just for a second, just the smallest flicker. But it was there. Did you take money from Blackwood? Sterling asked, voice quiet. He paid the hospital directly, Charlotte said desperately. I never asked him to. I refused his demands. Nate, you have to believe me. Do I? Sterling's voice was cold now, building walls faster than Charlotte could scale them. I met you 3 weeks ago. I do not actually know you at all. He stepped aside. The gesture destroyed Charlotte more than handcuffs ever could. The officers moved forward. Cold steel snapped around Charlotte's wrists. She was being arrested in front of the board, in front of the press, in front of everyone who had just watched her save Sterling's company. Nate! Charlotte's voice broke. Owen is the mole. Check his phone. The gardener, please. She is desperate, Owen said, shaking his head sadly. Tragic, really. They dragged Charlotte toward the door. She fought them, screamed Sterling's name, begged him to listen. Sterling stood like a statue, watching the only woman he had ever truly trusted being hauled away as a criminal. The company was saved. The stock was soaring. Aurora was a triumph. And Sterling felt like he had lost everything that mattered. The police transport had Charlotte in the back seat, handcuffed, humiliated, destroyed. Agent Ford sat in the front passenger seat. Professional, not cruel, but not sympathetic either. I have proof, Charlotte said desperately. I recorded Blackwood threatening me. It is on my phone. We will examine your phone at Federal Holding, Miss Bennett. You do not understand. He tried to murder my father this morning. He is trying to frame me because I refused to sabotage Aurora. Ford did not respond. The transport pulled out of the Sterling Dynamics parking structure into Manhattan traffic. Charlotte pressed her forehead against the window. Watched the city blur past. Thought about how quickly everything could fall apart. How you could make all the right choices and still lose. She had chosen integrity, had chosen truth, had saved Sterling and Aurora in the future of clean energy. And she was going to prison for it. Sterling stood alone in the empty boardroom. The board members had left to celebrate. Owen had excused himself to handle media inquiries. The press had their story. Aurora works. Sterling Dynamics stock soaring. Billionaire CEO deceived by beautiful spy. Sterling's phone was on the conference table. He picked it up, opened his email, read Charlotte's confession again. I chose you over my father. I chose integrity over survival. He opened his voicemail. Listened to the message Charlotte had sent at 2 a.m., the one he had not checked until now. Her voice exhausted and breaking. Nate, if you are hearing this, something went wrong. I am attaching evidence. Blackwood has been blackmailing me since the night we met. He threatened my father. Threatened to kill him if I did not sabotage Aurora. I could not do it. I could not betray you. So I am recording this. If he kills my father, if something happens to me, you need to know the truth. You need to know that I chose you, that I have been trapped from the beginning, that every moment with you has been the only real thing in my life. I'm sorry I was not stronger. I'm sorry I lied. But I could not become what Blackwood needed me to be, not even for my father, because you taught me that some things matter more than survival, integrity, truth, the person you choose to be when everything is burning down. Thank you for showing me that. Thank you for believing in me, even if it was only for a little while. Then a recording started, Blackwood's voice at the gala. 6 a.m. Saturday. If Aurora succeeds, life support terminates. Charlotte's voice terrified. I cannot betray Nate. He trusts me. Blackwood, your father trusts you will keep him breathing. Choose. Sterling listened to the entire conversation, listened to Charlotte being trapped, being forced to choose between her father's life and Sterling's company, being torn apart by forces she could not control. And Sterling had doubted her, had let them take her, had believed for even 1 second that she could betray him. The rage that filled Sterling was cold, precise, the kind of fury that did not explode but calculated, that did not destroy randomly but aimed. He picked up his phone, called Rollins. Where's the federal transport? Just exited the parking structure, sir, heading toward the federal building downtown. Block it. Sir, that is a federal vehicle. Interfering with... I do not care if it is the president's motorcade, Sterling said, voice sharp enough to cut. Use the armored SUV. Disable that transport. If Charlotte Bennett leaves this city block, you are fired. If you stop that vehicle, you get $1 million bonus. Am I clear? Crystal, sir. Initiating now. Sterling ran, through the boardroom, through the executive suite, past stunned assistants and confused board members, into the elevator. Slammed the lobby button. He was not a CEO right now, not a billionaire, not the Ice King. He was a man who had failed someone who had sacrificed everything for him, and he was going to fix it. Outside Sterling Dynamics, chaos erupted. The black armored SUV from Sterling's security fleet swerved diagonal across the street, T-boned the Federal Transport's front bumper with a sound like thunder. Steam hissed from ruptured radiators. Airbags deployed. Sirens wailed. Agent Ford was out of the vehicle instantly, weapon drawn, fury on her face. Federal agents, stand down or I will open fire. Rollins stood between her and the transport's rear door, hands raised but body blocking access. Mechanical failure, agent. Brakes gave out. Sincere apologies. That is obstruction of justice. Sterling burst through the building's revolving doors, ran toward the crash scene, arrived breathless, tie flying, looking nothing like a man who belonged on magazine covers. Agent Ford, you do not have a criminal, Sterling said, pulling out his phone. You have a victim. He pressed play. Blackwood's voice boomed over the Manhattan street noise. The death threat, the extortion, Charlotte's terrified refusal. Agent Ford lowered her weapon. Listened to the entire recording. Her expression shifted from anger to calculation. She was FBI. Had been trained to recognize real evidence when she heard it. Mr. Sterling, if this recording is authentic, we have jurisdiction for kidnapping, extortion, and attempted murder. It is authentic, and the woman you have in that vehicle saved American innovation this morning. She chose integrity over her own father's life. She chose truth when lying would have been safer. She is a hero, not a criminal. Ford studied Sterling's face, saw genuine emotion there. Not the calculated performance of a man protecting his interests, but raw desperation of someone fighting for a person he loved. Ford tapped on the transport window. Let her out. The door opened. Charlotte stepped out, wrists still cuffed, face pale, eyes red. She saw Sterling, saw the crashed vehicles, saw the scene he had created to stop her from being taken. You came, she whispered. I should never have let you go. Sterling's voice broke. Not for 1 second should I have doubted you. Ford unlocked the handcuffs. The steel fell away. Charlotte rubbed her wrists, unable to process what was happening. Mr. Sterling, we still need to process this, Ford said. We need statements. Evidence. This is a federal case now. Then process it, Sterling said. But Charlotte is coming with me. We have unfinished business. What business? Sterling looked at Charlotte, held out his hand. We have a meeting to crash. The Obsidian Club. Owen Clark just posted a photo on Instagram. Lunch with Victor Blackwood. They think they won. Sterling's smile was sharp as broken glass. Let us show them what losing looks like. 12:45 p.m., the Obsidian Club, the same private suite where Charlotte had saved Sterling's company 3 weeks ago. Full circle, poetic and brutal. Victor Blackwood sat at the window table. Vintage champagne open, expensive suit. The confidence of a man who believed he had destroyed his enemies. Owen Clark sat across from him, flushed, excited, already counting money that had not arrived yet. To the fall of Sterling, Blackwood toasted, and to the fool who thought a waitress could save him. Owen laughed. Did you see her face when they arrested her? Priceless. The best part, Blackwood continued, is the stock will dip again once the fraud charges spread. By closing bell, my acquisition team will have controlling interest. Sterling Dynamics becomes mine, and that arrogant boy learns that empires are taken by men who understand power, not built by children playing with technology. Speaking of which, Owen said, my payment. You said, make it now. The voice cut through their celebration like a blade through silk. Every head in the suite turned. Nathaniel Sterling stood in the doorway, Charlotte Bennett beside him. Behind them, Agent Rachel Ford and 4 federal officers. Owen's champagne flute slipped from his fingers. Shattered. Soaked the white tablecloth like blood. That is not possible. She is supposed to be in custody. Sterling walked into the room slowly. Predator energy. Controlled fury. Miss Bennett is currently consulting for the FBI. Turns out evidence of your crimes is quite compelling. Blackwood did not panic. Too experienced, too dangerous. He took a sip of champagne, studied Sterling with calculating eyes. Dramatic timing, Sterling, but you are trespassing on a private lunch, and your disgraced employee will not salvage your reputation. She is not disgraced, Sterling said softly. And you are not a businessman, Victor. You are a terrorist who weaponizes human life for profit. Strong words. I assume you have proof? Sterling nodded to Charlotte. This was her moment, the translator's final stand. Charlotte stepped forward. She did not look like a waitress anymore, did not look like a victim. She looked like someone who had walked through fire and emerged as something harder than diamond. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlotte addressed the room, other diners, staff, the phone Sterling held up live streaming to business networks. You are witnessing not a business lunch, but the celebration of multiple felonies. Her voice was clear, strong, the voice of someone who had found her power. Victor Blackwood, through Thornfield Trust, authorized a payment of $75,000 to Massachusetts General Hospital. Not as charity, as leverage. He used my comatose father as a hostage to force me to sabotage Sterling Dynamics. Blackwood's jaw tightened. Shut her up. This morning at 6 a.m., Charlotte continued, Blackwood sent a contractor to disconnect my father's life support. Attempted murder. We have hospital security footage. She turned to Owen. Owen Clark logged into Sterling's secure server at 3:14 a.m. using cloned credentials. Planted false evidence on my demonstration tablet. You texted confirmation to your handler. We have server logs. We have your messages. Owen stood, chair clattering. I was following orders. He threatened my family. He owned me because of my gambling debts. Shut your mouth, you incompetent fool, Blackwood roared. But Owen was breaking. The confession pouring out like poison finally released. He said he would kill my sister. Said he would destroy my mother. I had no choice. Sterling placed his phone on the table. Press play one more time. Blackwood's voice filled the elegant suite. The death threat, the extortion, the cold calculation of a man who treated human life as currency. The room went silent, then erupted in whispers. Phones out, recording, the moment going viral in real time. Charlotte picked up the water pitcher from the side table. The same pitcher she had held 3 weeks ago when she was invisible, when no one saw her. She poured a glass of water, set it down in front of Blackwood. You underestimated the invisible, Mr. Blackwood, Charlotte said softly. You thought serving coffee made me powerless. You thought poverty made me weak. But people like me, we see everything. We hear everything. We remember everything. And when we finally speak, empires crumble. Agent Ford stepped forward. Victor Blackwood, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, corporate espionage, securities fraud, extortion, and attempted murder. Owen Clark, you are also in custody. The handcuffs clicked onto Blackwood's wrists. His face twisted with rage and disbelief. This is not over, Sterling. I have lawyers who own judges. I have money that buys justice. And I have the truth, Sterling replied, and a very good translator. As federal officers led Blackwood away, the room erupted in applause. Real applause. Not polite clapping, but genuine recognition of justice witnessed. Charlotte stood in the center of it all, still trembling, still processing, still not quite believing she had survived. Sterling turned to her. The noise faded. The people disappeared. Just the two of them in a room where everything had started. Is it over? Charlotte whispered. Your father is under 24-hour protection. Blackwood's accounts are frozen. His empire is collapsing. You are safe. He is safe. Charlotte felt her knees weaken. Sterling caught her, held her upright. I have one more thing, Sterling said quietly. He pulled out his phone, showed her an email. From the Zurich Neurological Institute, they reviewed your father's case. They believe the trauma this morning, the brief oxygen deprivation, may have triggered neural activity. Dr. Chen reported he squeezed a nurse's hand. Charlotte, your father might be waking up. The tears came then. Charlotte could not stop them, did not try. Sterling held her while she cried, right there in the Obsidian Club, in front of the press and the witnesses and the city that had tried to break her. He held her like she mattered, like she was someone worth saving. 6 months later, the Forbes magazine cover did not feature Nathaniel Sterling alone. It featured two people, Sterling seated, Charlotte standing beside him, hand on his shoulder, both looking at the camera with the confidence of people who had been tested and survived. The headline, The Billionaire in the Voice, How Integrity Saved Clean Energy. Project Aurora had launched in 47 countries, energy costs dropping, carbon emissions falling, the future they had fought for becoming reality. But the biggest change was not in the technology, it was in the culture. Sterling Dynamics Lobby now had a bronze plaque. Every voice matters. Every janitor. Every intern. Every cafeteria worker was greeted by name. Charlotte's first initiative as Chief Operating Officer had been full tuition reimbursement for any employee pursuing education. 5 former custodians were now in management training programs. 3 former servers were studying engineering. The invisible were becoming visible. A Saturday afternoon in summer. Zurich Rehabilitation Center. The private garden was peaceful, fountain burbling, birds singing, flowers blooming in colors that seemed impossible after so much darkness. James Bennett sat in a wheelchair by the fountain, still weak, still recovering, but awake, present, here. Charlotte approached slowly, afraid if she moved too fast, this moment would shatter like glass. "Hey, Dad." James turned his head. The movement was deliberate, controlled. His eyes were clear. "Charlie girl." His voice was rough from 2 years of disuse, but it was his voice. "You did good." Charlotte sat beside him, could not speak past the lump in her throat. Sterling stood a respectful distance away, giving them space. But James noticed him. "Mr. Sterling, come here." Sterling approached, shook James Bennett's hand with genuine respect. "It is Nate, sir, please. You taking care of my daughter?" "She takes care of herself pretty well," Sterling said. "But yes, I am trying." Ooh, James looked at Charlotte's left hand, at the diamond ring catching sunlight. "He asked properly?" "He asked my permission via video call a month ago," Charlotte said. "You squeezed my hand twice for yes." "Smart man." James smiled, tired but real. They sat together in that garden, 3 people who had survived different kinds of wars, who had chosen integrity when survival would have been easier, who had learned that sometimes the quietest voice contained the most power. 1 year later. Boston. Charlotte and Sterling's wedding was small, intimate. Massachusetts General Hospital Chapel where James Bennett had learned to walk again. 40 guests, no press, no spectacle, just people who mattered. James walked Charlotte down the aisle, slowly, with a cane, but walking, alive. Charlotte wore simple white. Sterling wore a suit that cost less than his usual wardrobe. Nothing here was about display. Everything was about truth. Their vows were private, spoken low enough that only they could hear. Promises made not for cameras but for each other. When they kissed, their friends cheered, small and joyful, the sound of people who had witnessed something real. The reception was at the Obsidian Club. Full circle, complete. Charlotte stood in the same suite where everything had begun, where she had been invisible, where she had chosen to speak. Sterling handed her a water pitcher, their private joke now, their reminder. "Old habits?" he asked, smiling. "No," Charlotte said. She poured him a glass of water, set it down gently. "New traditions." They kissed again, husband and wife, partners in every sense. Through the window, Manhattan glowed. Sterling Tower displayed new signage. Sterling and Bennett Global Solutions. Not his company, theirs. Charlotte looked at that sign, thought about the girl who used to serve water in clear plates, who used to be invisible, who used to believe that survival was the only victory available to people like her. That girl had learned something critical. The quietest person in the room was not weak, was not powerless, was not less than. The quietest person was often the most dangerous, because they saw everything, heard everything, understood the architecture of power from the outside looking in. And when the quiet finally spoke, when the invisible finally stood, when the forgotten finally claimed their voice, the world had no choice but to listen. Charlotte had been a waitress who made $11 an hour. Now she was COO of a company changing the world. Had been invisible. Now she was seen. Had been powerless. Now she had built power from integrity rather than taking it through force. And she had learned the most important lesson of all. Real strength was not about never falling. It was about choosing who you became when everything burned down around you. It was about refusing to surrender the things that defined you, even when surrender would save you. It was about speaking truth when silence was safer. It was about being the person your father raised you to be, even when the cost was everything. Charlotte Bennett had paid that cost, and she had won. Not because she was stronger than her enemies, but because she had been willing to lose everything to keep her soul intact. That was the real translation, the real power, the real victory. And as Charlotte stood in that room with her husband, with her father alive and recovering, with a future she had fought for and earned, she finally understood what her father had been trying to teach her all along. You belong anywhere you decide to belong, not because someone grants you permission, but because you choose to stand and speak and refuse to be invisible anymore. Charlotte had chosen, and the world had listened. And the translator's gambit, a story about power, about voice, about the strength it takes to choose integrity over survival, about how the quietest person in the room might just be the one who changes everything. Because language is not just words, it is understanding. And understanding is power. And power belongs to those brave enough to speak truth, even when speaking costs everything, even when the world tells you to stay silent, even when invisibility feels safer than standing in the light. Charlotte Bennett had been invisible her entire life, until the moment she decided not to be, and that decision saved the world.